Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of MoonLore with Jennie and Laurie. Today we are talking about the full moon, which occurs on, what's the date?
October 31st, Halloween.
October 31st, Halloween. Samhain?
Yeah, Samhain.
Okay, so the full moon falls in Taurus, and that's what we're talking about today. First of all, before we go into the particulars of this full moon, we just want to touch on the issue of the phases of the moon in general. And, you know, all of the planets go through their cycles. They all cycles of planets start with the conjunction. So what we're looking at with the full moon, we're looking at the cycle between the sun and the moon. And that cycle starts at the new moon. Now, Jennie, I'm trusting you to have all the dates in line, because even though I wrote them down, I don't know where I wrote them. So this cycle began at the new moon, which interestingly was the new moon in Libra. The date on that again?
It's October 16th.
October 16th. So you want to think back to October 16th as the start of the cycle. You know, we think of these cycles, these lunar cycles, as the beginning. You plant a seed. A week later, we come to the first quarter moon. You know, every day the moon gets a little bit bigger after that first moon. The first quarter indicates or suggests a time when it's important to take some action on what you might have wanted to develop in this cycle. And then at the full moon, we come to the point in time where the sun and moon are exactly opposite each other up there, and we're in the middle, as being on the earth, we're in the middle between them. So we see the full illumination of that sun, which suggests a time of illumination, a time of full expression of that energy. And then a week later, a week after this, we come to the third quarter moon, where we begin to let go in order to get to the next new moon. So what else do you want to say about that before we bring in the example chart, or the chart of the moment?
Oh, well, you did it. That's a great description of the full cycle. The only other thing I would add is just the longer cycle. We're looking at a 1 month cycle, which you already mentioned, starting October 16th. And then we also look at the year-long cycle, which started April 22nd with our new moon in Taurus. So now we're at the 6-month point from that. And it was interesting, I thought, because April 22nd, Earth Day, and now we're seeing a full moon right on Halloween. So it's tying in with the kind of Western calendar of holidays and stuff. So it's interesting. Yeah, it has a little added layer of meaning, I think, probably to all of us because of that, which we'll talk about in a second here.
That is really interesting that Earth Day was on the new moon. And now whatever we planted then, the larger cycle, the full illumination.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and should we go ahead and share?
Yeah, go ahead and bring up that chart.
Okay. Because what I was going to say right on the heels of that, so here we have it, the Taurus full moon. See the moon over here, and it is conjunct Uranus.
Yeah, isn't it?
Exactly. Which was the other thing I was going to say, so that new moon, April 22nd, the moon conjuncted Taurus. Moon was in Taurus conjuncting Uranus, or pretty close to. It was like 3 degrees. So here we are again.
Interesting.
We have our full moon in Taurus, and we're with Uranus again.
Are we once again being given an opportunity to pay attention to Mother Earth?
Exactly. And I just keep thinking of Uranus as the awakener. It's the great disruptor and the awakener, which probably are in some ways the same thing. But in Taurus, I think really trying to raise a flag of awareness. Hey, humans, like there's more than just human society here. There's the planet we live on, our home, and all the animals and the trees and everything else that live on this planet together. And I just keep thinking that it is just trying to wake us up to the importance of that. And really just, you've said so many times, Laurie, of Uranus being the future, and the future of just including other entities in our thinking, and to just really widen and broaden our understanding.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a real powerful statement, that full moon with Uranus right there on the moon. There is something, you think about, just in general, a full moon brings in issues of anxiety, or I don't know if that's quite the word I want to bring in, but I remember, I always think, when I think of full moons, I often think about when I was very, very young. I think I was 17 or 18 years old. One of the first jobs I ever had was in a nursing home. And I was on a floor where the people were very low functioning. And the full moon was always a time that nobody wanted to be on the schedule to work on the full moon, because the patients would just be literally climbing out the windows. I guess I should state that was a nursing home where the local mental institution sent their elderly patients. So we didn't just have elderly people, we had elderly people with a lot of mental problems, and literally the full moon, people would be trying to climb out the windows. And it was really, you think about that. You think about the whole idea of people howling at the moon on the full moon, because people go a little wacky during the full moon because there's just so much that's illuminated. This is on Halloween. This is on Halloween. And what do you think about for Halloween? Images of Halloween always have that full moon, always have that full moon hanging over the cemetery, and people howling at the moon and dancing under the moon like crazy. So this particular new moon, given that right there, that Uranus connection, we're going to have some howling at the moon going on. We're going to have some people trying to climb out their windows that may seem perfectly normal in everyday life. This is kind of a wild statement with this, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, as you're talking, you're just making me think of, like, you're right, that is the symbolism of this Halloween and the full moon. But the thing that's interesting about that is, so Halloween and the Samhain of the, like, pagan tradition, I mean, this is the Day of the Dead, where the veils between the worlds are thin. So there's much more, it's more sort of translucent. So things, a little bit of osmosis going on from one dimension to the next on this day. And it's interesting to think about the moon being so bright in the sky that day and kind of chasing out those shadows that are at the same time kind of coming up, like sort of showing themselves. So when you put those two things together, it really is this day of just being willing to confront the darker elements, being willing to look at them, and also be willing to, there's almost a sense of play, even though it's serious and dark, because we put on these costumes and we take on these different roles in this time. And it's time to be okay with that, like to engage with that. And I think that's one of the things we need to do moving forwards in society, is be a little more welcoming of the darker sides, because we need them. They're necessary.
I mean, that's the whole thing about Samhain, is welcoming the darkness. And interesting as well, which has nothing to do with astrology itself, but the following day, November 1st, is when the time changes from daylight savings to standard time. So we literally, on this day of the full moon, Halloween, Samhain, we are approaching the dark in many ways. And it's our choice whether we welcome it or we fight against it. There's always that choice in these things. And, given that we are here on October 31st, 4 days from the US election. Wow. And thinking about welcoming the dark. I don't know how you want to think about that in your own heads, all of you, but we're in a pretty intense period of time. And I think with Uranus there tied in so closely, it's important that we welcome the intensity. We welcome the unexpected. We welcome, whatever is coming is coming. We might as well welcome it and embrace it for what we learn from it.
Yeah. There's a little bit of that sense of just like everybody's on their own personal inner journey as well as collectively being on a journey. And so it's up to each of us to attend to our own personal journey and be able to bring that to the table in a sense. And it's really a sharing point between people. And one of the things that I've noticed as Laurie and I have been doing these lunation series is just that right now the North Node is over there in Gemini, and it's touched back into the Capricorn Cancer thing a couple times this year, but mainly we're in this Gemini Sagittarius North Node. And so North Node in Gemini just keeps bringing in the idea of communication. So much of this is, how are we talking to each other? How are we relating to each other? And how are we listening to each other? And
how are we bringing our opinions to the table?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the South Node kind of brings in what we know, but the direction we need to move is toward communication in a way that others can hear us.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, not using our opinions to try to bang people over the head, but to bring a full conversation to the table.
Yeah, and so just following astrologically the train of thought, you know, you're thinking North Node in Gemini. Well, the next thing I want to check is, okay, well, where's Mercury in this chart? What's the condition of Mercury? And Mercury is in its retrograde phase. It's going to come out of retrograde on the day of the U.S. election, which raises a whole host of suggestions around delay and complications and some chaos, which I think you don't need astrology to guess that might be the case. And then the condition of Mercury, as Laurie has highlighted here, it is in a really tight square with Saturn on that same day. So that kind of brings that in.
There's a difficulty, a delay, a challenge, a requirement to do the work to communicate, to bring your wisdom to the table in easy conversation that people can understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting, and my mind immediately goes into all kinds of other directions. I don't want to confuse things.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's hard not to with this work. But one thing I can't help but say, and I do want to add in, is Moon is in Taurus, conjunct Uranus in Taurus, and you've got to look at Libra. Venus in Libra, and that kind of underscores that. Venus rules Taurus, and in this chart, you've got Venus strong in Libra up at the top of the chart near the midheaven, on the East Coast here where the election's taking place. So I do want to just pipe in that. It's just to bring in that idea that this is a strong Venus chart, and Venus is about unification. There's a lot of different things going on there, but it really is about the natural patterns and the way they work and the unification of things. And so it might not be immediately graspable, but it is where we're headed in the longer term picture here.
Interesting. The fact that Mercury is retrograde and it's squaring Saturn in its retrograde, that means with the back and forth, this is the second of 3 exact hits of that Mercury, which suggests sort of a little bit of a longer story on that, that restriction, hard work of communicating. And the dates on that, I think we talked about. Do you have them in front of you?
Yeah, the first time Mercury squared Saturn was September 23rd. And then now it's going to square it again November 1st. So basically right after this full moon. And then the final square after Mercury's gone direct again is November 6th.
So it's right in that time of the election. Big surprise. And Mercury stationing direct on election day, right as it's in this square with Saturn. Well, we know there's going to be a lot of contention around the results. There's going to be, who knows, but it's not going to be pretty. The last time Mercury stationed on election day, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but the last time Mercury stationed on election day was in 2000, when the Supreme Court ended up making the decision for the election and gave it to Bush, when Gore had won the what's the word? The common vote.
Yeah, the popular vote. Yeah.
The popular vote. Thank you. And, you know, I mean, this is, I think that there's just something in this story, and in all of these stories that are going on right now. I think people are really waking up to the issue of the Electoral College.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that story is going to last into 2021 in a big way, with some of the patterns that are going on in 2021.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else we want to say before we think about how this impacts us on a more personal level?
The only thing I wanted to add here, and I'll make it short, is just that you still have Mars in Aries retrograde, and that is such a strong, fiery Mars, and it does tie into these figures because it is squaring with Jupiter. So I just wanted to, I don't want to go off the rails with it, but just mention that square is still happening. So the tendency to be frustrated and right now is very, very easy, right at our fingertips. And so again, it's that if everybody's got to do their personal work around working with your own thinly stretched emotions, and just be cognizant of what kind of energy you want to put out there. It's so hard right now to not feel thin. And I've talked to a lot of people about just not feeling resilient. And so, but if you know you're not feeling resilient, that knowledge is power, and it might give you just that little pause before you enter into a frustrated space. So I do think it's important to mention that.
Yeah. And particularly, you know, if you know your own chart, if you've got planets in the cardinal signs, that Mars squaring all those cardinal planets there, that's it's a hard energy to manage. And frustration, aggravation, anger, selfishness, and really going in there and thinking about, okay, I'm so angry, I'm so frustrated, I feel like it's all about me and, you know, my anger. What can you do with that can actually be helpful? Think about Mars. You know, Mars can get angry and it can do all kinds of damage with its anger. But at the same time, if something needs doing, Mars in Aries has an endless reserve of active energy to make things happen, and
Yeah, absolutely. So I that's well said. So yeah, I guess the final step of this.
I just want to say
about
that. I don't know why. This image popped in my head that, you know, the big scary guys with their guns showing up at the polling station have that Mars is very active. But so is that Mars very active the people that are there at the polls helping you because they know it's important. You know, so just to think about the difference of how that energy can be used. The people who are, you know, driving people to the polls because they know the importance of it. Mars active, you know, find a way to use that drive in a way that's actually helpful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're basically just summarizing why do astrology. It's exactly for this, because if you have that information, then you know you can harness that energy in a way. You get to choose how you want to harness the energy. And if you don't even know, how can you do it? But if you know, you can be very active and choiceful and conscious about it, which is really all we're trying to do here is raise consciousness.
Absolutely.
So, and on that final note, how about I'll stop the share here and then just think about where this falls in your own chart. Where is Taurus in your own chart?
Yeah, look for Taurus. Look for Taurus and Scorpio in your chart, and think about how there's an opposing or an illumination between those two areas in your own chart. For me, it's happening in the 9th to 3rd house. So I'm like, okay, get back on that writing project that you've kind of let slide with Mercury retrograde and going on vacation and all the rest of that stuff. So this is like, I feel like, especially with Uranus tied in there, it's like, wake up to what you've kind of let slide between those two houses in your own chart. How about you, Jennie?
Oh, that's a really good way that you put it. Because for me, it's happening. I have Taurus up in the 11th house of groups and friendships, and Scorpio down there in the 5th house. But that's a really great way to think about it, because I think what's happened for me, because I've been preoccupied with helping my family move cross country post wildfires, and what's happened is my own community locally I feel out of touch with, and I need them. I need to kind of get back in touch with people and re-engage a little bit. So I think it's that. It's like wake up to that and take those conscious steps to reach
I
out,
have an
because I need to
idea.
anyway. Yeah.
I have an idea.
What's the idea?
I have no idea if your parents would be up to this or your friends would be up to this. But as you're saying that, and I'm thinking about that 5th to 11th, that giving love and receiving love of those two houses, I'm thinking, I know you've got a beautiful fire pit in your backyard. And I
Yes.
suspect that your friends would welcome a brief visit around the fire to meet your parents. So that's my recommendation.
Oh, thanks, Laurie.
Have
Yep.
a fire.
I love that.
Invite.
Because I mean, yeah, I will. Yes. And in the 5th house, the giving of love. So bringing the illumination of the sun to the 5th house to create a hearth fire.
Yeah.
And also the other thing I'll note is that the full moon also does fall. It does contact Mercury for me. So it's extra, gives it a little extra clout, a little extra oomph, a little extra important that I take action. So think about your own chart. Notice what house it falls in. If you have an understanding, you can kind of check in and see if it contacts any other planets at the same degree. Or if you're not sure, please contact one of us and schedule a consultation. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, where can we find you, Jennie, if we want to make an appointment with you?
Hiddenpathastrology.com.
All right.
And you are Astrolore.org.
Astrolore.org. And yeah, we both are available for consultations and teaching and all kinds of other things. So stick around. We're going to be making lots more videos into the future, and we're delighted to have each and every one of you here listening to us.
Yes, thank you, and have an amazing Halloween.
Yeah, dress up, dance, go by that fire, and express yourself.
Yes.
Bye.
All right, bye.